Hey, welcome everyone to the AH session with a long-standing friend of mine, Atul Bovan. Looking forward to the content. I was commenting on the fact that his glasses and moustache aren't quite as blue. Apparently that is an AI enhancement that he wears. So, metrics in DevOps. Buckle up for a roller coaster ride to success. Atul, I'm going to go on mute and take my picture off. So over to you. Thank you very much.
Please confirm. You can see my screen. Yeah. And you can hear my voice okay.
You are audible and visible.
Fantastic. Okay. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Stuart. So let me dive in. Just a quick introduction about myself. Atul Bovan. I work at BMC, as you can see on the screen here. My role takes me to many organizations around the world, and we have many discussions, including around metrics. So today, I thought I'd share with you some lessons that I've learned, and just some guidance, really, when you're setting up metrics and working with them, things to watch out for and things to aim for, really. Now, just want to be clear that my presentation today was created over the Easter holidays, and I had kids in the house at the same time. So it's going to be a bit of fun, okay? So please bear with me. And it's going to be based on the theme of the story of Alice in Wonderland. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. So just to set the tone, okay, I'm going to give you a few minutes to take a breather and just enjoy and get in the mood of things. So I hope you've got your volume on nice and loud, and I hope I've shared my audio. So let's see how it goes. Feel free to dance if you want to.
Into a world so grand, where mainframes rule the kingdom, in a tech wonderland. She met the white rabbit, always in a rush. Metrics and KPIs, he said, are the tools we trust. The mainframes are wonderland. It's a mad hatter's world. Without measurements, we'll be lost, even with Cheshire Rabbit as our host. In Wonderland, where data flows, metrics and KPIs, the way to go. Modernize the mainframe, keep it in sight. With clear metrics, we'll do it right. The mainframes are wonderland. It's a mad hatter's world. Without measurements, we'll be lost, even with Cheshire Rabbit as our host. In Wonderland, where data flows, metrics and KPIs, the way to go. Modernize the mainframe, keep it in sight. With clear metrics, we'll do it right. The mainframes are wonderland. It's a mad hatter's world. Without measurements, we'll be lost, even with Cheshire Rabbit as our host.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that little ditty, and that should hopefully get us in the mood for the story we're about to follow today. And it's really, as I said, all about the journey of Alice in Wonderland. So really, the presentation is a new experience I'm trying out, really, storytelling. And it was devised with some children in the house over the Easter holidays. So I hope you do enjoy it. And in terms of just setting the scene, if you are interested in metrics, if you are involved in metrics, KPIs, etc., you may know some of these things I'm covering today already, or you may not. But it was important for me to go over it because in my engagements with the clients I work with, quite often they're going down the wrong route or learning lessons a bit too late. So that's the whole idea of today, just to share some of those with you. And so I'm going to begin by just setting a scene a bit more about Alice in Wonderland and a specific scene within her story.
Can you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?
That depends a great deal on where you want to go.
I don't much care where.
Then, it does not matter which way you go.
Well, as long as I get somewhere.
Oh, you're sure to do that if you only walk long enough.
So, based on this conversation, would you consider Alice as a worthy leader in your organization? So, when Alice speaks to the Cheshire Cat in the story, she really has no idea where she's headed. There's no sense of direction or focus on where she wants to get to, really. But we can excuse her because she's just a young child in the story and perhaps can't articulate as clearly as we would. So she was in the dark, scary woods and just wanted to get out of there. Now, in our real world, we can easily be overwhelmed with the rapid change of technology, the change in the practices that we have to work towards, and the challenges of the modern and changing workforce. I'm sure all of us are experiencing that at the moment. And leaders responsible for managing that change simply can't afford to be like Alice. Now, what if we were to put ourselves in her shoes? So in your day-to-day work, where you've got certain objectives to meet, do you feel like you could define where you want to go clearly? Because there's quite a few elements we have to consider. So first of all, do we actually know where we want to get to? Do we actually know where we are currently? What is the current state of where we are and how we do things? And do we know the safest way and the fastest way to get there? So all of these things are reasons why we need to be considering metrics and measurements in the real world. Now, in my personal journey, I've often been lost and experienced ups and downs. And I can very easily imagine my journey as a roller coaster. So experiencing a dopamine rush, which makes me feel motivated and energized when things go well. But also, I felt dejected when things don't work out quite as well as I'd hoped. So there's often feelings of anxiety, irritability, low motivation, and general dissatisfaction when things are failing. And I don't know if any of you have felt the same experiences, really. So as I said, we can easily be overwhelmed. And again, thinking about the technology that's ever changing in our environment. And you can see it here at the conference right now. Every day, there are so many updates on new technology announcements from various different vendors. Also, the processes around us within our organizations are ever changing as well. And I know that with every departmental reorganization, we're having to adjust to new teams, to new people sometimes, and also to new goals that are set for us. And also at the moment, I do feel for the new younger workforce. I think the mainframe wonderland can be quite a scary place without the right framework for support in place, really. So, okay, I think I've framed this discussion enough now. Let's get to work to see how we can navigate this wonderland that we work in. So let me introduce you on the screen here to our Alice. So she's the head of platform and has a responsibility for developing strategies to address several company objectives, as you can see on the screen. So everybody's concerned about the transitioning workforce. We have to make sure we can attract new people to the mainframe, but also support them, enable them to actually embrace and work effectively against that platform. Costs is another one where all organizations are looking to invest in a smart way and not waste money on things that are redundant. Resilience, as you can see from recent news articles, that certain organizations are suffering outages. So we have to make sure we're on top of resilience, make sure we have stable systems running. And the same for security. We've got to protect our business and our customers. So security is a goal, a high state of security we're looking for. And finally, winning market share. Every organization wants to be competitive and be the leader in their space. So as a starting point for our Alice, she needs to define what success looks like for her in each of these areas. And unlike the Alice in Wonderland, our Alice knows that any action she takes without knowing where she's headed would be a big mistake. So she wants to break things down and like any good leader, maintain control. So this is a fundamental aspect of a DevOps mindset, really. Putting in place some form of feedback loop so we can adjust our journey to remain as focused as we can. And Alice breaks down into 3 different categories for us here. So the first one we're discussing is outcomes. So she realizes that the outcomes are her destination. That's where she's trying to get to. So for example, one of the challenges we talked about in the previous slide was a transitioning workforce. And to that, there are many underlying factors that she needs to consider. So things like when somebody new comes on board, they've got to understand the new mainframe platform that they're working on. They've got to be able to understand the technical environment. So the programming languages, for example, COBOL, PL1, etc., the databases, JCL, storage, etc. There's quite a lot to learn there for them. But they've also got to understand what the business applications do for them and also how the business applications work. Okay. Now, thinking about it as an industry, we've never been very good at documenting our systems for future generations. And it's just not something that is easy to do well, and that's the issue. So these are some of the considerations underneath the outcomes you would look at for her destination, really, of transitioning workforce. Now, as the name suggests, KPIs, key performance indicators. So these help us with indication of how we're performing along our journey. So let's take the challenge of understanding how our applications work. That's something that the new workforce needs to understand. How do applications work? So the kinds of things we can do is we can create documentation. We can do one-to-one knowledge transfers. And we can provide maybe advanced tooling to give our teams insights into how our code is working currently and how our files and data is structured, things like that. And the KPIs here can help us understand how we're progressing on those lines. So, for example, how many applications or application elements have we documented? How many of our junior apprentices have had those one-to-one sessions with the subject matter experts? And how many have been through the training programs for the new tools that we provide, which will provide the valuable insights about how the code that they're working on actually works? Now, these are great KPIs, and we can tick the boxes to say we've done these things, but it doesn't give us the real long-term and sustainable value that we want in our workforce. So that's where the detail of the metrics comes in. So carrying on with the example of onboarding the new gen mainframers, let's think about what detail we need. So it's all very well training somebody to use a tool, but are they using all the key functionality? Are they using it frequently or on a daily basis? So I'm sure we've all experienced it. We all have Microsoft Word or Excel or PowerPoint on our PCs. but can we honestly say that we're leveraging it to maximum effect? And we need to do that if we're going to be leveraging the tools we need to support our applications, business applications. Also, I mean, does everybody in the teams have access to the latest and greatest versions of the tool we're providing? Is there a trend to only use the tools when there's an issue, rather than being proactive and preventing issues occurring in the first place? So lots of different considerations. And these are examples of metrics that we can measure continuously. So this way, teams can proactively keep on top of the challenges of understanding how their applications work. Now, without these metrics, if we don't monitor these, think about the consequences. Over time, the teams are going to reduce their efficiency, and it will actually detract from achieving their goals. So it's important we do actually look at these things. And these are metrics I've seen organizations embrace and put in place. Now, let's take a look at some more examples of metrics. And for the next slide, I'm going to be quiet for a few minutes and play some nice music for you in the background. But please read the metrics when they come up on the screen and think about the value of each metric. So let me give you just a few seconds to think about that. Okay, so hope that's given you a bit of time to read and think about these metrics. So I wonder how many of you thought that all these metrics are useful? There's many people I speak with who are sometimes cautious about these things. And this is a really important point, that they say that these metrics give them only a partial and sometimes even a misleading view of the situation. And let's take, for example, the one at the top, commits. So we can measure easily how many commits are being done every hour or daily, for example. But a high number of commits could be a good thing, make it easier to isolate and track changes being implemented. But it could also make it challenging for us to track the evolution of the change in the application, because we then have to group many commits together to get the full picture. Okay, and what about deployment frequency, for example, on the bottom left there? We can deploy at a fast rate, but what if our deployments are actually failing? Okay, so there's something missing that can bring more meaning to these metrics. And one of the things is really we have to learn to take these metrics in combination sometimes, and not in isolation. And it's important we have that to try to build a fuller picture. But another key element that's often missing is context. Now, think about the story of Alice in Wonderland. So Alice, the White Rabbit, Cheshire the Cat, and all the other characters, they all make the story happen, but the context is the background of where each of the scenes is set. So in the story, the garden is where Alice first encounters the rabbit and follows it. And then there's the rabbit hole, which Alice follows the rabbit through. And then there's the house, and then the tea party, and so on. There's different scenes, and that helps us to explain the behavior of each of the characters. And each of these really adds a new dimension to the story. Now, in the same way, the context behind the metrics gives us a true meaning and perspective that we need to take into account. So, for example, we have the failure rate on the screen. Now, that can be quite alarming if it shoots up all of a sudden. But understanding the nature of the failures will give us a better idea of what actions we can take. So perhaps in our case, perhaps there was a database upgrade during that deployment time that led to the failures. Did we do sufficient testing of the application or the database upgrade before that was implemented. So we can learn lessons and prevent the situation from arising again in the future. Let's take a look at the metrics from another perspective on the next slide. And don't worry, there's no music here at the moment. So here you see some metrics with some additional information in the additional columns across the page. Now, there's a lot to take in here in one go, so I am going to give you a bit of time to read through each of these. Think about whether these are metrics or similar metrics that are used within your organization, and how do you measure the progress of those over time. So again, I'm going to give you a little bit of time and give you a bit of background music to enjoy at the same time. Okay, so hope you've had time to read through that. Now, if you look on the right-hand side, we've got three different states here, or three different categories of now, in 6 months' time, and in 12 months' time. So let's have a talk about these things. So the first one is about having a baseline for your metric. So we have to have a baseline because we need to know where we are right now. How are we performing at this very moment in time? And it's always good to have a starting point because we know, if we can't measure something right now, how are we going to measure any further improvements that might happen going forward? So the ability to actually measure and take the measurement is an important factor, because otherwise we'll be defining a metric with no real way of understanding what the values of those are. So do you have metrics that have baselines currently? That's an important consideration. The next thing on the screen here we have is milestones. So obviously we're working towards some kind of a goal, but the goals are maybe quite far away. So in this example, it's 12 months away on the right-hand side. So do we want to measure now and then in 12 months' time, or do we want to take some interim measurements? Now, what these measurements allow us to do for the milestones is to remember that we do have a goal we're working towards, so we don't lose focus. And also that if we are not hitting the right milestones the way we expect, then we can take corrective action earlier on. And again, this is something I see quite often in organizations where they will define the metric, they will review it in 12 months' time when it's going to be measured for any success or failures, etc. But the milestones in the middle aren't clearly defined or measured. So any chance they had of changing direction simply wasn't taken. And then the third point on this slide itself is the goal. We've got to be able to define clear and achievable goals within a specified time frame. So remember, when Alice spoke to Cheshire the cat, she wasn't able to do that. She wasn't able to define what her end goal really was. So these are three things I would say, please consider these in any kind of metrics that you're defining to keep them real and actually practical to use. Okay, so what other lessons can we learn? So drift, this may be a term you've come across before, because it's quite easy to go down a rabbit hole, if you exist upon itself. We can be quite focused on the outcomes, the milestones and metrics, and many other things. And sometimes we don't see that the background scene is changing. And the simplest way to, I think, give you an example of this really is to make it clear. Something I was working on with one organization, and they were looking to measure the usage of a certain data manipulation tool that they just implemented. Then they observed that the usage of the tool was declining every month. And they were feeding the same data to calculate the metric, but they were being very disappointed. And then it turned out that the developers were increasingly automating the use of that tool. They weren't going in manually and using it. So in fact, the usage was significantly increasing. It was just that they weren't accounting for the automated use of the tools. Okay, so in this example, their input data was drifting away from reality. And I suppose the lesson to take away from here is don't be afraid to continuously review and question why metrics are giving unexpected results. Okay, so be brave enough to do that, consult with the teams and get the right perspective. And just as Alice learned over her time in Wonderland, you've got to question everything if you want to make sense of things in that wonderful Wonderland, really. And that was the only way to survive for her. The next lesson really is about planning. And we have to think ahead about everything, really. And that's something that Alice didn't do before she jumped down the rabbit hole. When we design metrics, we've got to think about what those metrics would indicate. Okay, and that's something that a lot of organizations miss and then end up struggling, really. So let's look at an example. So for example, incident rates. An incident rate can go up, it can go down, or remain the same. There's 3 different states. And let me give you a little time to think about what each of those states could do in terms of what potential action you can take. So what if incidence rates went up, if they went down, or if they remained the same? Okay, so as I said, we want to avoid confusion and chaos of being in a place where we're not prepared, really. So if incident rates go up, we need to start thinking about investigating the nature of those incidents. Is there a common thread? What changed in the environment? Is it people? Is it processes, etc.? So that's quite a simple thing to do, and it's quite kind of sensible. But what if incident rates go down? Are there any actions we should be thinking about? Well, surely we should be doing the same, but more of it, really, to keep the incidents going down. So keep doing it, but do it better, do more of it, really. What if the incident rates remain unchanged and the same? And quite often I see this and people feel that that's great, nothing's changed, so we're happy with that. But we could potentially review the trend, maybe review how things can be even better than they are now. And that could be things like, for example, adding further criteria to your quality gates, let's say. So there's always actions, but if we don't prepare for those when we define the metrics, then we'll be just trying to work out something on the fly, really, and that isn't really a productive way of working. So it's always better to be prepared. And what I would say is you may want to consider how you act on the metrics that you measure within your environment. And what plans do you currently have in place, really? So we've discussed how to construct metrics and considering context around the metrics and how we can, what actions we can take once we analyze them. But there are some traps we can fall into. So in the story of Alice in Wonderland, she was distracted by many things in her environment. And typically it becomes what we call vanity metrics, really. So it's very easy to choose metrics that make us feel good. And if that's your objective, that's fine. But we can't really take action against those type of metrics. So we saw some metrics earlier, number of lines of code written, percentage of code coverage achieved, or average time taken to make a change to a program. Those are great metrics, but where's the action behind that? Okay, they're measurable, but we can't always take action. So, for example, with the code coverage, is it enough to have a percentage code coverage metric? Or do we want to achieve 100% code coverage during testing of the code that we've changed or impacted? So just a further definition to extend that really. So again, review your metrics and think about, are they vanity metrics or are they sanity metrics? These are the real actionable metrics really. So for example, change failure rate. This can help us understand if we need to do more to improve the quality of what we're delivering. Or even things like team satisfaction surveys. This can tell us if we need to drive greater engagement of our teams. And I mentioned the code coverage example already in terms of achieve 100% of all our changed and impacted code, really. Then we have the lesson about relevance, really. And it's an important reminder that things are changing all the time, really. The company and departmental goals, priorities are changing all the time. And sometimes the metrics you generated or created or defined 6 months ago may no longer be valid. So we may want to review those and make sure they're still relevant in the current thinking. So again, it's all about challenging the metrics you have. And it may be that when you first started off on your journey, the metrics you defined were relevant and they did add value. But as you started maturing, for example, as you develop your CI/CD pipelines, etc., you may want to slightly shift those metrics or redefine them altogether to give you the value you need at that time. Okay, so try to make sure your metrics are focused on what you're trying to achieve. And again, part of this is making sure you are thinking actively and critically about your end goal in your mainframe wonderland that you're working in. So just to summarize, every good story is a roller coaster ride. And I'm going to bring up a few points on the screen here, just as a reminder of the kinds of things we've talked about just now. Now, these are, I think, good takeaways because they're lessons I've learned from industry. Looking at them now here, they may seem like common sense, but many of them get quite forgotten over time, really. So outcomes, KPIs, metrics, make sure we have that mindset. Design the metrics with the goals, baselines, and milestones in mind. Make sure we know what the actions are behind any potential metric state. Remember, some metrics work in combinations, not in isolation. And always take the context into account behind the scenes. We also discussed the vanity metrics versus the sanity metrics. Are they all actionable? And also, over time, keep reviewing the relevance of the metrics in your environment. Okay, so don't be afraid to challenge those. Now, that brings me to the end of the presentation. Thank you for spending time with me at this stage. Are there any questions before I move to the next slide? No? Okay, so in that case, what I would ask you to do is please do complete the feedback form. You see the QR code and the link on the screen here. And I'm going to give you a few minutes to fill that in. If you can do it right now, please. And I'll play a little song in the background just to give you a bit of entertainment. But thank you so much once again for your time. And I hope to speak to some of you again in the near future.
Alice fell down the rabbit hole into a world so grand, where mainframes ruled the kingdom in a tech wonderland. She met the white rabbit, always in a rush. Metrics and KPIs, he said, are the tools we trust. The mainframes are wonderland. It's a mad hatter's world. Without measurements, we'll be lost, even with Cheshire Rabbit as our host. In Wonderland, where data flows, metrics and KPIs, the way to go. Modernize the mainframe, keep it in sight. With clear metrics, we'll do it right. The metrics and KPIs, the way to go. Modernize the mainframe, keep it in sight. With clear metrics, we'll do it right. The mainframes are wonderland. It's a mad hatter's world. Without measurements, we'll be lost. Even with Cheshire Rabbit as our host.
Thank you everyone once again, and have a great rest of the day. Take care.